Good. Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the break. Green for go. Hydrogen is always a tough topic, so I can see why everyone's outside still having coffee. But I think we're really going to dig in. It's going to be a great panel discussion. We've got excellent people on the floor. Dr. Stanford down there, it's quite a big stage, so I'm going to have to wave. At least we won't have to shout. I hope you can all hear. So my name is James Mackay. I am the CEO of the Energy Council of South Africa. Maybe just one or two comments I would really just like to make as we start. So I think previous comments that were made about the role of government and government's participation, certainly for those who weren't here, I mean, the DMRE breakfast this morning, I think, was a very good initiative, well attended, and really important points being raised. I think also we've seen the extension of the IRP engagement process very welcomed. And so I think that there is a strong role of government. We have to have government, we have to have a capable state. I don't think that we can bypass government. We have to partner with government. And I think this is also part of the focus of the Business for South Africa partnership between business and government. And I really do think that that is strengthening and working and delivering results. And that partnership really is about the energy crisis has three important legs to it. Yes, energy security, we've got to end load shedding. Two, we've got to build a lot of new generation. And I think we heard from the previous panel really big numbers. And we've got to add to that also gas to power and other forms of energy which weren't covered in that panel. And third, we have to fundamentally modernize and catch up with our energy sector, including grid modernization and a lot of market liberalization. So reform is very important as well. So within that context, as we look forward, green hydrogen is always a little bit, where's this going to really materialize? What's the real opportunity for South Africa? We know our own South African Elon Musk called the hydrogen fuel cells fool cells. So it's always a bit of a tough debate. And so what we thought today was there's 4 questions I'm going to put to the panel. First, if we can just a little bit set the scene, let's just reflect on sort of where are the opportunities at the global level? How does that link to South Africa? Is this a real opportunity and by when? 2, we want to just talk about what's happening on the ground. So we hear lots about sort of the Mogalakwena hydrogen trucks, the Buchubai program, Sasol sustainable aviation fuels, the Priska cluster, the Hive green methanol project. Are these really happening? What's happening on the ground? Are we seeing investment? Are we seeing kind of traction? I think that's very important to give us a sense of progress. Third, we have huge economic and social deficits in South Africa. How and why is green hydrogen good for South Africa and for South Africans? Or is this just another private sector commercial project that will create export revenues? And lastly, what should we do next? Okay. So quickly, if we can, I think we've got Annelies van der Merwe from the DTIC, Director of the Green Economy Investment Spatial Industry Cluster. So I think really good reflection on policy and government positions on this. We're looking forward to that. Craig Parker, Research Director for Frost & Sullivan. Technology Insights, where's this all going? Fantastic. Devaksha Maharaj from Ikigai Engineering, MD. Where's the skills in the workforce? Are we going to be able to manage this? Dr. Marcus Till, Africa President of the Bosch Group. I didn't realize he'd been in Africa for over 100 years, so deep experience and understanding and knowledge. We look forward to that. Dr. Till, and then Gaylor Montmason-Clare. I think a lot of you know him as leading the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan and under TIPS. And then lastly, Dr. Stanford Chidziva, Director of the Green Hydrogen Program, UWC, but also I think the Association of Advanced Material Chemistry. So I think deep technical skills and understanding. So as we get going, I would like to also reflect, last year I attended Enlit Europe in Paris. It was very interesting. They put up really the 4 key challenges in energy facing Europe. One is grid. They said in Europe they've got over 3 terawatts of renewables queuing for grid. That's 3,000 gigawatts. Okay. Second key issue, regulations. Third key issue and challenge, skills and workforce. The fourth key issue is supply chain. So I think coming back to being, we understand Europe is probably 15 to 20 years ahead of where South Africa's energy sector is. So these problems are not going away. Even mature economies who are very advanced still have the same problems and still are going to need strong governments, capable states in order to play a role with business. So maybe we can kind of kick off and start question number one. What's the opportunity for SA? Can we reflect on this? Marcus, could we start with you? And I believe you've got a quick slide just to also reflect on as we speak. Please, Marcus, go.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just to tell you very briefly about also why Bosch we are interested in the hydrogen space. And that's speaking in general. On the left-hand side, you see production. So that's electrolyzers, where South Africa could be one of the leading countries in the world with all the PGMs, so the platinum group metals that are in the earth here. So for alkaline electrolyzers, one might not need so much of the metals that are in the ground in South Africa, but for proton exchange membrane electrolyzers, one needs those type of metals. So from my point of view, with also all of the know-how that I know of exists at South African universities, in terms of industrialization on the electrolyzer side, there's a lot of opportunity. On the other hand, then one needs to talk also about where would that hydrogen go to. And my personal opinion now, with being involved also with quite a few of the very, very large projects, the gigawatt projects, whether it's Namibia, but also in Morocco, Egypt, or in South Africa, it is extremely difficult to find financing because of the chicken and egg problem. That's why I would always advocate to also look at local offtake. And local offtake, which is not in the gigawatt scale, but maybe the megawatt scale, and that gets me to the right-hand side. I mean, the storage side we now have very much under control. So to store hydrogen in liquid or in gas form, ideally in gas form, is no longer so much of an issue. But transportation still is. So to transport it up to a few dozens of kilometers is still okay. If it goes beyond a certain amount, one needs pipelines and many other things, and again, it becomes more complicated. That's why on the right-hand side from your side on your slide, there's I've highlighted a few of the offtake possibilities. I mean, there's also ammonia, obviously, with fertilizers, etc. That's not where we as Bosch are competing in or where we want to supply technology for, but one can think about a lot of things. Steam production for hospitals. One can think about steam production for food, and South Africa is very strong in food production, even on a worldwide basis, and more or less decarbonize food production in that sense. But last but not least, one can use it for transportation or for replacing diesel gensets with hydrogen gensets, and that's not a thing of the future. Together with Deutz, we've developed a hydrogen genset, which actually is not on the fuel cell technology, but which is an internal combustion engine. And we can talk about later, if there's time, about what the big advantages is with using internal combustion engines instead of the fuel cells or fuel cells. We are also already in serious production with fuel cells for trucks in China and in America. So they are already running around now also in the future in Europe. I personally don't believe fuel cell trucks or fuel cell any mobility in Africa makes a lot of sense, because you need highly pure hydrogen, whereas an internal combustion engine, you can have very impure hydrogen, can just feed it in, and it works. And one hydrogen truck with a few kilograms of hydrogen can run for 1,000 kilometers, so you don't need so many hydrogen fueling stations. You could possibly even produce within a small electrolyzer the hydrogen locally, and then one can take it from there in South Africa. That's what I would very much also with the government try to promote in South Africa. First, think about local offtake. How can we use it? Maybe also replace importation of petrol, importation of diesel. There's enough sun in the Northern Cape or here in the Western Cape. There's maybe other opportunities in the Northwest province, and make it happen, not as pilots. I mean, we need to start with pilots, but then very quickly go to the megawatt scale and go for the local offtake.
Thank you, Marcus. I mean, my experience in hydrogen is that we've seen bottom sort of pressure as BEVs and battery chemistries are eating into the bottom end of the hydrogen market. And the top end of the market are the hard to abate, kind of aviation, shipping, feedstock, and those are still a long way away. And so the price point makes it very difficult to recognize where's the pathway to scale for green hydrogen. Absolutely, there are great opportunities and initiatives. I think the markets are there, but maybe Craig also, before we turn to government, your kind of thoughts around, more from a technology perspective, what are your views on this? And you've also got a quick slide here.
Yes.
To talk to.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with looking at, especially the demand side, because that's obviously what's going to be driving the use of hydrogen, and specifically looking at the circular economy and how we can, bring that to sustainability is obviously the green hydrogen. But there's a couple of things I want to point out just in terms of South Africa, I think, which is in our favor when it comes to this. The first thing is obviously the minerals. So when it comes to the electrolyzer of, green hydrogen, we've got platinum and iridium, and South Africa is like a 75% global producer of platinum and 90% of the resources of iridium. So we're sitting with a very good advantage in terms of that, in terms of the supply value chain. But then looking at what's happening geopolitically, there's a lot of studies and papers that have been done, especially by the North Americans as well as the EU, looking at supply chain and security of supply chain when it comes to not only batteries but also hydrogen and minerals as we move forwards. And I think one thing that we've learned a hard lesson was during the lockdowns and then subsequent geopolitical issues globally was that the supply chains are something that will definitely come into play, and us as South Africa, as part of BRICS, and looking at the global south becoming more independent is definitely something we're going to start looking at in terms of promoting the value chain sort of that South Africa can play a part of. And just in terms of demand, we've mentioned automotive. To me, that's going to be the biggest demander of hydrogen because obviously of the applications there. And we heard obviously between the fuel cell versus the actual combustion engine. Currently the combustion engine, there's a lot of work being done with that because obviously the companies have realized that this is the way forwards. And we've heard obviously that's got to do with a lot to do with the storage and how the hydrogen is actually used. But currently the technological issue with that is that hydrogen is extremely corrosive. So you need special alloys and coatings in the engines to actually handle the combustion of hydrogen. But a lot of work is going into this from Toyota, BMW, and Toyota is releasing one of their new engines in 2026. There's a lot of work that's going into that. So I think when we look at that, I think there's a lot of potential. And then just the other thing I think is, as South Africa, we need to fall into the sustainability and look at recycling of the minerals back into the value chain itself. So we'll mention more of that. Thanks.
Thanks, Craig. So two things still come out for me is that price is a problem. And scale demand. Okay, I want to come back to you, Marcus. I like that. I want to ask Annelies. So maybe Marcus is going to change our view, but if price and what sounds like market, so bilateral trade agreements, if those are big unlocks that can accelerate that pathway to scale, where's government on this? How are we going to use policy to accelerate?
Yeah, so I think the role of government is really to create an enabling environment, right, and to ensure that we use the mechanisms available to us. And there are a number of mechanisms available to government. I mean, I believe that we should play very much a coordinating role in bringing different stakeholders together, signing these bilateral agreements. Last year we saw a slew of agreements being signed between South Africa and key partners like the Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, etc., to either already start talking about potential offtake, to talk about support in developing the local ecosystem, support on skills development, etc. Government can also be responsible for facilitating catalytic investment where it's needed, specifically in infrastructure. That will be crucial. So that's something really important that we would have to unlock. Policy and regulation. We've seen now in the renewable energy industry what, through the National Energy Crisis Committee, what can be done if government departments and entities and regulatory entities collaborate to unlock challenges that can get renewable energy, in this instance, on the grid quickly. So government needs to play a very important role in policy and regulation, the potential for incentives. And all of this really speaks to enhancing South Africa's competitiveness, ensuring that we play in a space that makes most sense for our economic development needs, but also taking up this immense opportunity that we have to be a key player in the industry.
Annelies, can I dig a little bit deeper? I mean, are these bilaterals actually securing offtake? Because generally what I've seen is that they are, let's work together and put some money into research, technology development, positioning. But when are we going to sign up for volume?
So we signed. One of the agreements that was heads of agreement that was signed last year was between the Dutch and Danish governments and funding institutions in South Africa to unlock $1 billion worth of funding, and that looks at funding in a range of and using innovative blended financing mechanisms to finance some projects. So I think we need to, although sort of we haven't signed contracts yet, we're not quite there. But if we have these, if you can say almost indication of intent. So once you are ready, and whilst you get ready, we are here to support you to get ready. So it's really important to have those early stage agreements as well, because we need the assistance on in various areas to get to that point where we can then actually sign an offtake agreement.
Okay, excellent. I'll come back to price then, Marcus. On our group this morning, I posted a quick little arena view that said currently green hydrogen's around $5 to $6. In the future, with learning curves, it could probably get to $1, but that's a long way away. What's your view on how competitive green hydrogen is at the moment, and how do we make it more competitive and close deals?
Yeah, setting the stage a little bit and just also adding on to what was said previously. I mean, we've got fuel cell trucks already running since 2022 in China and in the US in serious production. We've announced at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas now in January that we'll have serious production of internal combustion engine hydrogen engine-powered vehicles this year. So it is there. And it would not work if the hydrogen that would come there is not competitive. So I agree with you, there might be some challenges if we use solar or wind to do it. For example, in Angola, they use now hydropower, which is practically coming at zero cost per kilowatt hour, so it is almost unbeatable. But we've done now calculations, and a second thing is the white hydrogen, so that hydrogen found, for example, in Mali, that you can just mine, which is also then almost for free, except for the equipment. And there's a hydrogen that is produced as part of chemical processes. And there's always also the question today, for example, Sasolburg, I heard a ton or more of hydrogen is vented, so that at opportunity cost zero. But all of that hydrogen is not enough anyway. So if we want to really power, we need hydrogen from every sector. And our own calculations, where I was part of consortia in the Northern Cape in Namibia, would point to modern concentrated solar technology in going below $2 when the project now starts. Not future technology that exists, but the project is not implemented yet. So I could very well imagine that in a place like Northern Cape or Namibia, and there's 3-4 other places around the world where you've got similar solar radiation, where with the right equipment, the right technology, you can already get with today's technology down to $2, and then we start to talk, we become very competitive depending on the application that we were talking about.
Thank you. Well, if we getting the sort of the environment around bilateral support, market offtakes, if prices coming down, the next question, Gaylor, I mean, having been very involved in Sarum and the renewable energy side of things, infrastructure. I think we've seen a real challenge around the planning and sort of investment in infrastructure, green hydrogen projects in South Africa. And certainly if we think of the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Project in Sasol, the Mogalakwena hydrogen truck, the Valley, Hydrogen Valley, the Priska projects, Hive projects, Buchus Bay. I think a big part of the challenge of these projects has always been to try and say, how do we anchor the infrastructure portion? We either need big grids or big pipelines. The rest we can manage, but we need government, we need policy, we need regulations, and where's the master plan for this? How do we carve that out and get it done? I don't know if you've got a view from your perspective and work, how to unlock the infrastructure side of these projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're putting your finger on one of the key issues. I think we first forget the scale of investment that's required and the ecosystem that's actually necessary to make these investments realized. If we believe the projections are on the kind of grid that we're going to require going forward, to invest in green hydrogen meaningfully as a country, numbers that we see floating around are a grid of 200, 250 gigawatts. When frankly, these are scary numbers. Our grid is what 45 gigawatt right now. It's massive, absolutely massive numbers that have to be massive investment that have to be made. Of course, with that comes opportunities, but we have to realize that it's a massive scale. Similarly, I think when we are thinking about investments in some regions like Buchel Bay, and it's the same across the border in Namibia, everything is to be built. I mean, people talk about the Luderitz region and like Buchel Bay like it's already developed. I mean, people should go there. I mean, even the road is not there. Okay, you have to build everything: the road, the housing, the water supply, the electricity. And so it's the scale of investment is really massive, and so that's going to take quite a lot of coordination and collaboration to get that going. So I think, of course, the commercialization strategy is critical, but a lot of the other elements around transport infrastructure, around water infrastructure, around, of course, the grid, and how we manage the sort of land use impact of those investments as well, and the community impact of those investments, has to all come together. And I think we're not quite there yet, in terms of understanding how we coordinate all of this. I think we have our eyes on the opportunity and say, well, it's potential. Yes, it's great, but you don't get to that scale overnight. And so I think we need to start incrementally and start aligning ourselves. And I think there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, but how we can coordinate that is not quite yet very clear, to be honest.
Thank you. We heard this morning in the DMRE CEO breakfast, and I think the keynote speech as well, a lot of emphasis on the social impact, social inclusion. Stanford, maybe I could kind of turn to you. What are your views? I mean, I reference also this against massive challenge, priority challenge across Europe, skills and workforce. If we could solve the market, the price, the infrastructure, do we have the capability to have the skills, the workforce to develop this sector? Where is it at the moment? What are your views on that? And you've also got a slide that we wanted to put up. Let's see if it's kind of, there we go. I'll put it up for you. Maybe okay. We won't have lunch yet. There we go. Okay. Stanford, your thoughts, thanks.
All right. I just wanted to go to lunch. But okay, so what is currently happening is that through the various government departments and the universities and TVET colleges, they've noted the change that is, or rather the disruption that is being caused by renewable energy. And they've actually streamlined the training which is being offered in all these institutions to try and build capacity for the upcoming job markets. So you will find that starting from this year in the TVET colleges, they've introduced the component of renewable energy, where they are focusing on the when we look at, for example, the electricians. There are now there is now modules that talk to solar installations. Then when you move into universities, there are now modules that are talking of hydrogen production, hydrogen storage, downstream consumption. You look at your electrolysis, you look at your fuel cell technologies. So there is a considerable effort that is being done to address these future jobs that are coming, but it's happening at a small scale. But hopefully, the rate at which these professionals that are being generated will meet with the growth of the industry as it is evolving to date.
Thank you. Devaksha, you've got a view. I mean, you've got boots on the ground in this space as well. No?
I'm not loud enough. Okay, there we go.
There we go.
I am listening to the experts around me, and I applaud Prof. Stanford to bringing to the table the skills gap. So we on the ground, as you say, we do the training at the TVET colleges, and what we've seen is forgetting the solar and the renewable space, the gaps lie with the electricians and the engineering courses that are out there. So they're just not meeting what we expect. And when we want to start bringing in the solar installation and now the hydrogen programs, the basics are still not up to the scratch that we want it to be. And I think that needs to be revisited. I'm quite impressed to see that he's got TVETs and a particular college there, but are we getting to all the TVETs? Unfortunately, me being on the ground, I'm not seeing that enough. What about the girl child? Are we going back to grassroots and trying to get them into STEM courses? So I'm putting a spanner in the works to my colleagues around me to say, job well done on the academic side. We know there's HISA that's giving bursaries to the MSc and PhD students, but what about the students that are at the TVET colleges, the FETs, the technicons, the secondary schools? Going back to the primary schools, how are we now trying to close that inclusivity gap, the gender gap as well? How are we getting the young girl child to start looking at STEM courses? I love what's happening around me, but let's go back and let's try and focus on the challenges we're having now in the solar space and correct that so that we're able to approach the hydrogen space in a better forward-thinking way. So that's my point.
Yeah, I mean, the integration of skills, it's not just one skill, it's an entire kind of generation or growth of a person. So it's very important. I mean, we've recently, last year, we engaged and signed an MOU with TNO of the Dutch, who were trying to put funding and support programs in for the high-end technical skills at PhD research levels. The problem was that while that is a very good initiative, what happens before that, and then importantly, what happens after? So if there isn't an industry that can take up those kind of qualified and skilled people, well, there's only one place they're going. They take their skills and they leave.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated problem, the skills capacity development. Marcus, you had a thought on that?
Yes, 2 points that I wanted to make. I'm since 2016 the chairman of the Training Education Committee at the Southern African German Chamber of Commerce. And we've been very much engaging with TVET colleges, in particular for the automotive industry, but also for others. And our challenge is that, for example, for a European curriculum, we had to take the best mechatronics, just as example, mechatronics students who had finished the curriculum in South Africa, and then we had to do a 1-year immersion training to start the European curriculum. So we now have been working now as a chamber also with the Department of Basic Education, because that's where the TVET colleges are, to try to revamp the curricula, etc., to actually be at the level that it should be, so that we can get proper productivity adjusted costs. That is huge amount of work, but that also deals with the general, that I see educational challenge that we have in South Africa with the basic education system. Because if they don't have the basic education, then they can't even go to these type of TVET colleges. But what we again want to do, we have got a very small plant in Brits in Northwest Province, where we're doing automotive parts. It's only 1 billion South African rand per year, so it's one of our smallest plants worldwide. And we now, with Steinbeis University and some German and South African players, want to build the first pilot plant for electrolyzers, but also solid oxide fuel cells, to take our plant completely off grid with hydrogen. We've got enough space. We've got already solar that we can use to power our plant 1/3 of the time. We would like to completely take it off. And there we would actually bring in both the master students as well as the blue-collar workers in a vocational school, how we would know it from Europe or from Asia, and train people on the spot as a lighthouse project. And we are convinced that it will work. It will not be easy, but maybe that could also then be a lighthouse for other places in South Africa.
I think the one thing we can say for South Africa, we always have good plans. It's implementation and the pathway to scale sometimes missing. I think, on that as well, I'll just reflect on our neighbors, Namibia, Project Hyphen. In my previous role, I was actually part of the original startup team that kind of created that structure for the private equity. It was actually originally going to be a South African project. The reality is that you could go to Namibia and you could see pretty much the entire government in 3 days, and you could cut through all of the red tape and you could get things done. It's now a fantastic project. I think phase 1 is about $5 billion, phase 2 is $10 billion. It's going, I think Climate Fund Managers just bought 25% share of that project. I should have stayed there. I would have made a lot more money than the Energy Council, but anyway. It's a real example that the stuff actually works, and there's a project that is being built. So what do we have to do differently? Maybe, Annelies, I could start with you, government.
Yeah, so we need to implement. You're right. I can list all the strategies that we have. We have hydrogen is a big frontier sector in the South Africa investment strategy that was approved by Cabinet last year. Cabinet late last year approved the green hydrogen commercialization strategy. That's another strategy that feeds into the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. So lots of plans, great initiatives, but we really need to go over to implementation. I think one great step in that is the Industrial Development Corporation, which is our partner in the development of the green hydrogen commercialization strategy, has very recently in this week announced that they will be establishing a green hydrogen secretariat at the IDC, which I think is great because the IDC is really, although semi-government entity, it being a development finance institute, still a very practical private sector approach. And this secretariat will be sort of a focal point for the private sector, and they will have various work streams to look at a number of issues. For example, one looking at funding, one looking at developing supply, developing demand, which we've spoken about, incredibly important. Technology and skills is one of the work streams that secretariat will look at. Policy and regulation, development of shared infrastructure, and also community engagement. Again, we cannot do this without having community buy-in and bringing that in. So I think that's a practical step of how the green hydrogen commercialization strategy and the JET IP green hydrogen initiative is now being already started with implementation. And that's what we want to see on the ground. And I think another practical thing is, there are companies investing. You've mentioned some of the projects. As the investment in spatial industrial development branch, our role is really also to support those companies on the ground. Simple regulatory things that need to be sorted out. Getting the project, working with the special economic zone in Kucha, for example, with Hive, to ensure that those relationships flow, assisting them with introductions and meetings, etc., with Transnet and government entities. So really working on the ground to ensure that those projects can get off the ground.
Absolutely, there's a lot of opportunity. Incidentally, we also, South Africa, we're hosting the World Green Hydrogen Council Congress next week in Johannesburg, which will be also, again, very interesting. Gailo, you put your hand up. You want to make a comment on government's role?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think we need to be a little careful as well with the parallel with Namibia, to begin with. I mean, it's a fantastic project for Namibia. I mean, the scale of it, the total investment value of the project is roughly the current size of the GDP of the country, which is kind of mind-boggling to even understand what that means. But because it is happening in a particular context, it's also very much developed as an enclave, where the skills, the technology, all the inputs are going to come from somewhere else. Actually, a lot of it probably from South Africa. And for South Africa, we actually don't want to replicate this at all. We need to realize what is the strategic value of green hydrogen for our economy. And the strategic value of green hydrogen actually is building the value chain. Within the short term, the primary opportunity linked to green hydrogen is actually not in green hydrogen, is in building renewable energy. That's where the primary value is. And along the line, then it will be about the downstream use of that hydrogen in steel, in chemicals, in fuel, because we have obviously access to the technology and we've got some capabilities. So we have to be careful not to be almost developing green hydrogen for the sake of it. If we don't build the linkages, upstream and downstream, then we're missing a massive opportunity. And so that intentionality about how we build this, around the input manufacturing, for things like catalysts, membranes, of course we mentioned the PGM, the renewable energy, of course, and that's where SARM comes in, but building the value chain around our solar and wind and our battery industries, but also around water supply. Desalination, again, it's about membranes, but it's about things like valves, pumps, tanks, actuators, which again, we have industries. And so if we can build that value chain, for me, that is really where the value lies, and then we're going to really reap some benefits. And so again, I think that coordination between those different initiatives is quite fundamental. But we have to really be mindful and of that integration. And where we can learn from Namibia a little bit is that, yes, they've kicked into gear. I mean, they have a ministerial council that meets every 2 weeks with the developers to iron out any issues. Of course, the scale of the project is their current GDP. They're taking it seriously. They should. But if we want to be a player in the game, we have to take it as seriously. And so I think that coordination between ministries with private sector and other players is where the opportunity lies.
Very, very good words. And I think that, that was one of the things that made Project Typhon so much easier to get off the ground was the simplicity. There was nothing there. You could engage with all the role players and you could bring all the variables, put them on the table and say, how do we sort it? And so maybe that's a lesson as South Africa. We got to get really much more clinical and focused on being serious around getting stuff done. We can't solve all of the variables at the same time. So I'm going to put a kind of closing question to everyone. So I think the variables that we do have to deal with, though, I mean, technology, and there's a lot in technology, and we spoke a little bit about infrastructure versus kind of the components versus RE. Price, I think we've got a way to go on price, but I think it's definitely moving in the right direction. The learning curves are there, but we probably do need some incentive structures or subsidies now to get the investments moving. Market, we need offtakes. How are we going to lock those in? Government support, that's very evident and very clear. Skills and capacity, we've spoken about. How are we going to build that? That's even in Europe, that's kind of one of their key challenges, skills and workforce. And lastly, we haven't really touched on it here, but financing and financing models. So if those are kind of the big variables that we've got, I'd like just a closing view. What should we prioritize? What do we do next? Is there an unlock in the green hydrogen investment sector that you feel do the following 1, 2, 3 things, and we'll really see the dial being moved on investment and projects? Stanford, can I put you on the spot? Let's start at the bottom end of, we'll work up.
From my perspective, where I see green hydrogen in a big way is where we have a wholesome solution through the implementation of what we call the agri-PV. Agri-PV, what it does, it gives it's going to provide energy to the farm. It's going to also to improve food production. Then at the same time, we need to, as you know, that due to some carbon credits challenges that we are having in Europe, and Africa is one of the largest exporter of agricultural produce to that market. So which we need to move into some initiatives that are green so that we remain relevant to the market that we are playing. So where do we see now the green element coming in when we have agri-PV? We now can produce on-site green ammonia that we can feed into our crops and have organic crops. So the organic crops, you get them at a premium, you have created employment, then you do have your hydrogen. Your green hydrogen. If you produce your green hydrogen there, where do we use the green hydrogen? Green hydrogen, we then can use it to power some fuel cell implements at a farm that decrease your carbon footprint for your production at a farm facility. So I'm just taking one example here to say these are the opportunities that we find green hydrogen playing in the space in the agricultural sector. We talk of can go in the maritime. There are talks of using green ammonia as a fuel to fueling ships. If you go into the aviation, there is a niche for green fuels, and South Africa is sitting at a position where we have this capability to produce green fuel when you use the green molecule that we have produced here. So there are a number of industries that can benefit from this green molecule, but there has to be some coordination of efforts so that we realize this dream before it is taken away from our nose. Thank you.
Very good. So I'm hearing, let's tackle easy markets first. We need to use the carbon credit markets to support financing, and then let's grow into the hard to abate sectors, shipping, aviation. So maybe that's a prioritization. Gaylor, what are your thoughts?
Renewable energy, renewable energy, renewable energy. That's the priority. Look, it makes or breaks the production of green hydrogen, period. You know? So if we're serious about playing in that game, we have to sort out our transmission and our broader physical infrastructure and our market infrastructure for investment in renewable energy. You know, again, mentioned it. The numbers that we see around is 200 to 250 gigawatt of renewable energy to be built. I mean, numbers I've seen, just to decarbonize Secunda, Cecil's complex, 35 gigawatts Okay, that's almost the current grid of the country. I mean, that's for one facility. Okay, that's the biggest facility, but still, this is one. So, I think if we're serious, actually we should be focusing on renewable energy as much as possible. We should then support our downstream industry to implement and use green hydrogen in our existing industries, so that it doesn't become just an export-oriented industry where we just, produce and ship to Europe, wherever, and that we actually build our capabilities in green steel, in green chemicals, in sustainable aviation fuels, and so forth. And then third, how do we build the ecosystem and provide subsidies and support for our input manufacturers that actually can tap into that industry and then can export as well, because we can build the capabilities. We see some companies investing in membrane manufacturing, in fuel cell manufacturing, and many other aspects, of course, in the renewable energy industry. And so how do we support this industry to actually invest in the country? That's part of what Saram is trying to do, but it's a bigger question, of course. And so for me, that's the kind of ecosystem that we need to put together. But in the short term, I'll repeat it again, renewable energy, renewable energy, renewable energy.
So, Guido, if he's still here, will be loving you. Good. So I'm hearing kind of get back to basics. If we can't do the basics, how are we going to sophisticate into new markets? But really that means build a lot of power, get the grid sorted out, understand how we can expand that. We can leverage that, but at the same time, build the local demand. We can't only, like Project Hyphen is just an export kind of revenue stream. We need local demand. And then, again, coming back to financing, where are the gaps and the viability gap funding, where's that going to come from? Because there's definitely kind of gaps in the funding models. Great points. Marcus, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would look at where the biggest pain points for the South African industry right now is, and that is scarcity of electricity and very high cost for electricity. And apart from the fact if you can't produce half of the day, then it also cost involved. So it may make a lot of sense to get actually the plants off the grid. And I was just talking about one of our plants. We're not talking about gigawatts, we're talking about megawatts. The same thing for data centers. So there's quite a few industries where you can, for example, also use then the heat generated by solid oxide fuel cell that you feed with hydrogen to produce electrical energy plus some heat to produce steam, so that could be used, for example, again in the food production. And if one looks at special economic zones, if one looks at industrial parks, and one looks at single plants like ours, we are talking about the megawatts. And here in South Africa, we don't have this hydropower, we don't have the nuclear power or all the other powers which from a European point of view would be considered green. So it is essentially boiling down to either solar or wind. Wind is not there in much of, or everywhere in South Africa, so it boils down back to a certain degree to solar, like what we are using in Northwest. And then if one looks really at the business case, it might already break even with the investment in the hydrogen production, in the electrolyzer and the solid oxide fuel cell with the current state of affairs with Eskom. In cases where it might not be from a macroeconomical perspective, but I'm now not government, it might make sense to actually look at subsidizing at least until the time that electrolyzer production here goes up and the local then cost for putting an electrolyzer in and the solid oxide fuel cell in, that might be a really good consideration, because that in the end would sustain the industry here. And so I think from upstream to downstream, it would also close the loop and would work for everyone.
So I'm hearing a very practical implementation kind of focus. Find out where the pain points in the industry, use technology to address that, and maybe we don't need a big strategy, Annelies. We just need some investments to close the gap and get building. But thanks for this. Devaksha, your thoughts?
My thoughts goes back to Marcus's slide. And the next time I want to see that slide, I want to see training being merged into that 3 process phase that you reflected, so that I'm really happy to hear that they've actually working with MSc students and vocational students, but add that to this wonderful slide so that we can see that we are not leaving anybody behind, which is what's currently happening. And I think in the CEO breakfast session, our CEO of EWCETA had challenged the CEOs to say, how are we adding to that? They have regular sessions which my team and I sit on where they develop curriculum for the modules that needs to be out there. And at times, there's one person sitting on this platform. We are the experts that's contributing to the curriculum development. We love what's happening in industry, but we need to put this into paper so that we can create that sustainability in the skills gap that we're dealing with.
Good. Build the workforce. Craig, your thoughts?
Yes, so I think if we look from an investment perspective, return on investment, there's two things from a South African perspective that stand out. Number one is risk. The other one is time to return. So when it comes to boosting investment, there are so many actors involved and stakeholders in a large-scale green hydrogen project. And it's not just stakeholders, but it's also resources. I mean, we heard earlier about the steel industry, the transport industry, all that. So we need an investment climate that is actually supportive of that, because number one, the private sector needs to be involved, and they're the ones who are going to provide most of the funding at the end of the day. Government is kind of your stopgap to address the issue with price parity till we actually get there. So we definitely need government involvement. But the key thing is that we've got to realize from a longer term perspective is where do we fit in to the competitive value chain aspect. Now, I took a walk downstairs at the solar exhibition, and my count was that 60% of the exhibitors are from China. So where's South Africa going to fit in the green hydrogen value chain? Are we going to compete in technology? We might. Or are we going to compete in actually building infrastructure? And that's why we've heard before. I think the key thing is to start building infrastructure, start the projects, and these projects might range from the micro to the macro. So, for instance, technology is advancing in such a way that these electrolyzers can be actually quite compact. So maybe in 20 years' time, we'll have a situation where you could have solar and actually produce your own hydrogen, obviously with safety standards, at your house to fill your vehicle, for instance. So we need to figure out where we are competitive in this value chain and actually focus on that. But the key thing is that we need to start with projects, because once that supply chain is established, it makes things easier, because there's a lot of things that need to fall in place for that supply chain to obviously function. And once that is there, it just makes things easier. Good.
Well, I'm definitely hearing policy clarity and coherence, which is a great segue into Annelies. What's your thoughts from government? How are we going to unlock this?
My first point was policy coherence and certainty. and coming from government, I know that that's incredibly important. We need to, I think in the earlier session, Vido was talking about this long-term vision. We need that, and we need to follow through, and we need to communicate consistently and with clarity on where we're going. And then secondly, the regulatory environment. So not only creating the regulations for a new sector, essentially, but easing the regulatory burden on the private sector, ensuring that it's easy to get an electricity connection for your facility, or ensuring that you get the requisite skills, that the people that need to come into the country get visas. There are some simple, very practical things that can be done, and that are fairly easy, low-cost fixes that can really create and contribute to this enabling environment. And then lastly, infrastructure. Nothing can happen without infrastructure. And this enabling infrastructure, and yes, the stopgap government can catalyze massive infrastructure development through unlocking, fairly simple things, and using mechanisms such as taxes incentives, etc., to unlock that. But infrastructure is incredibly important, and not only civil infrastructure, but also digital infrastructure to help with the exchange of information, etc. That's really important.
Excellent. Well, I hope the panel has given some good insights. I don't know if there are any questions. We've got a few minutes. Oh, okay. We got quickly 2 questions over here. Maybe we'll take the 2 questions, and you can also just say who you would like to direct it to. Oh, okay, so 1, 2, 3. Let's see if we can get to that.
For Annelies van der Merwe, the hardest working people in government are the people who create paperwork. Can they rather do licensing? For hydrogen reduction, can you briefly talk about the new trend towards using much cleaner hydrogen reduction systems to purify minerals and iron oxides, silicon oxides and titanium oxides instead of using pet coke? And if we fix 3 problems in the world, then we'll have a perfect world. Poor education, bad parenting, and mental illness. But all 3 can be fixed with education. So Devashka Maharaj is right. Education is key.
That sounded like a question for government and maybe technology.
Yeah, the first part of the question, sorry.
The last piece was a statement. So just, Tim, your first question was for government was, can people...
I think what I'm trying to say there is that I know with the registrations, sometimes the paperwork is very long and it can be shortened. I know that the solar registrations in Hermanus is very short and concise and quick, and it's all online. But in City of Cape Town, it's like wading through syrup.
Okay.
So that also might be a broader, just a government efficiency question. Maybe we could just have 1 or 2 other questions, and we could have 1 set of answers, if that's okay. I think the ladies over there wanted to ask a question with the mic. There we go.
Thank you. Okay, so my first question will be, I think my view on green hydrogen has sort of changed because I've been to many meetings or conferences where they discuss green hydrogen. But my concern is, okay, so there's also the City of Gruleni strategy on green hydrogen, and there were projects that I think the Jevin Chamber was already, they presented, and they needed investors. There's also that HISA that's working on storage and stuff. But the hesitation in terms of investors, and in those meetings they discussed how they have market on the other side, but why the hesitation on investors? Is there really a market for green hydrogen, or do we as South Africa has to sort of create our own green hydrogen market and infrastructure, so we use it, we produce it here and use it? Because if there's a market sort of overseas for green hydrogen, why are people very hesitant to invest in some of these projects? And secondly, there's an element in green hydrogen. We're saying it's green hydrogen, but there's an element where now when you are transforming the green hydrogen into the gas, you also need to use sort of not so clean energy to be able to transport that. So are we still classifying it as green hydrogen? Those are my 2 questions.
Good. Okay, so do you have a last question? So let's take a last question then, and we can just...
Yes, my concern is we love innovation, but some of the innovations keep our people unemployed. My worry is at this point in time, as we go green, what are we doing to reskill the contingent of working people so that they can be able to fit into the new methodologies of, energy production or usage? We've seen ourselves go into 4th industrial revolution, and we left some people behind unemployed because they were not technologically inclined. We've seen Cape Town used to thrive in the manufacturing sector, but then the automation of processes has kept a lot of people out of employment. So I'm just sitting here thinking, what is our government and the various industries that are, the various industries, what are they doing to make sure that we do not sit with the current stats of unemployment? That is my concern. The other issue that Mark has raised on his tippy toes is the idea, look, we exist in a global space and we should be able to, operate as such. But at what point is Africa going to assert itself in using what it has to benefit itself? His question was, the displaced out there are from China. We love Chinese, but we love Africans more. And it feels like we want to always be piggybacking on the innovations from outside of Africa. In fact, it's actually the brain power of Africans that now comes to be sold to us at a later stage. Are we talking about our minerals that we export raw, and then they process them from somewhere else, and then we buy them at higher rates? So I think as we position ourselves, we should actually assert ourselves as well. As there should be, the policy framework should actually assist to assert ourselves as owners of all this. I mean, I saw we're having about there's a periodic table that was there at some point, which was talking to the fact that we as Africa actually produce the minerals that are useful in the value chain on this new revolution, hydrogen economy. But I would still love to see us actually saying we own this and we will IP it here and we will export it the way we've been importing foreign innovations. Thank you.
Very good words of wisdom. I can't agree with you more. We do need to assert ourselves. I think it is the role of government. I'm looking forward to SONA tomorrow, and elections is going to stir them all up, and we're hoping that we're going to see a government that is really taking action and putting Africa on the map. There's one comment I'll just make and hand over to the panel if there are any thoughts, is that the energy transition, including green hydrogen, this is not being forced on us. It's being accelerated by climate change, but this is a technology disruption. It's going to happen whether we like it or not, because the future technology of energy is all digital, and it happens to be clean. It's distributed, it's decentralized. That is the future world of energy that we're going to live in. Now, not everyone can be skilled and reskilled into that. What the government needs to be assertive about is, how do we make sure that the socioeconomic structures in this country cater for everyone? But that doesn't mean to say that everyone can become a green hydrogen professor. So this is a technology disruption. It's going to happen. Any comments? Just we are out of time, so not to take too much time, but any closing comments just reflecting on the questions? Stanford.
Okay, let me comment quickly on reskilling of the existing skill set. There are programs that are being initiated by a number of universities and colleges that are attracting the existing skill set. And I can mention one, Chemical SITA, that they had a program with the chemical engineers to reskill them in line with the hydrogen economy. That's one. Then I want to comment also on what is happening on our minerals. I think through the CSR, MinTech, and some universities. There has been some considerable amount of work that's been done in terms of adding value to platinum. And there is a company that is actually producing this platinum catalysts to the market in the world that is based here in Cape Town. So, yeah, there is some work that is being done, although it is being done at a small scale. We can do better. That I can resonate with that. Our counterparts in China, they actually run faster than us, mainly maybe because of our finding models here that do not actually support us to run fast with innovation so that we take it to the market. But yes, there are things that are being done.
Okay, I think we are out of time, so I'm going to have to call it and encourage the other questions. If you want to come and chat to the panelists or myself, we're definitely available. But thank you very much to the panelists for your wisdom, insight, and effort here. And can we give them a round of applause? And thanks very much for your attendance. Thank you.